Case summary. Court of Appeal of England and Wales. Citation 1919 2KB 571. Judges Lord Justice Warrington, Lord Justice Duke, and Lord Justice Atkin. Decision date December 16, 1919. Background facts. Claimant Mrs. Elsie Balfour. Defendant Mr. Arthur Balfour. Mr. and Mrs. Balfour were a married couple who lived in Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, where Mr. Balfour was employed as a civil engineer. In 1915, the couple returned to England on leave. Due to Mrs. Balfour's health issues, specifically rheumatoid arthritis, she stayed in England for medical treatment while Mr. Balfour returned to Ceylon. Before his departure, Mr. Balfour agreed to send his wife £30 per month as maintenance. However, the marriage deteriorated and Mr. Balfour stopped sending the payments. Mrs. Balfour sued her husband for the agreed monthly payments. Argument. Claimant's argument. Mrs. Balfour argued that there was a binding contract between her and Mr. Balfour. She contended that Mr. Balfour's promise to pay her £30 per month constituted a legal agreement which he had breached by ceasing the payments. Defendant's argument. Mr. Balfour argued that there was no enforceable contract. He claimed that the agreement was a domestic arrangement and not intended to be legally binding. He asserted that there was no intention to create legal relations, a key element required to form a contract. Final outcome and law justification. Decision. The Court of Appeal ruled in favor of Mr. Balfour. Law justification. The court held that the agreement between Mr. and Mrs. Balfour was not a legally binding contract. Lord Justice Atkin delivered the leading judgment, explaining that agreements between spouses, particularly in domestic contexts, are generally not intended to create legal relations. 1. Intention to create legal relations. The court emphasized that not all agreements between spouses are contracts. There must be a clear intention to create legal relations, which is typically absent in domestic agreements. 2. Consideration. While consideration was present, Mrs. Balfour's agreement to stay in England for treatment, the absence of a clear intention to create legal relations meant that the agreement could not be enforced as a contract. Key concept. Implications of Balfour v. Balfour, 1919. Domestic arrangements. This case set a significant precedent that domestic agreements, particularly between spouses, are generally presumed not to be legally binding unless there is clear evidence of intention to create legal relations. Key lessons. 1. When analyzing potential contracts, it is crucial to assess the intention to create legal relations, especially in domestic or social contexts. 2. The distinction between domestic agreements and formal contracts is vital for understanding enforceability. 3. Legal professionals must carefully examine the context and nature of the agreement to determine if it constitutes a legally binding contract. In summary, Balfour v. Balfour, 1919 teaches that not all agreements, particularly those made in a domestic context, are intended to have legal consequences. This case serves as a cornerstone in contract law for understanding the importance of intention in creating enforceable agreements.